When I woke up, I found myself back in the year of my second year of high school. My desk mate walked over to me, holding the latest model of the iPhone. He opened a picture, and with a commanding tone, he said to me, "Gu Wuyan, I want this. Buy it for me tomorrow." I laughed. After all, I'm a second-generation rich kid, but not a second-generation fool. I looked at the picture on his phone, and it was of a designer watch, priced at nearly 10,000 yuan. It looked nice indeed. For me, 10,000 wasn't really much of a deal, but why would I buy it for him? When I first woke up, I thought I was dreaming. It wasn't until Ma Zhu came over and knocked on my desk, asking me to buy him the watch, that I realized I had really returned to the past. His name was Ma Zhu Ri, my desk mate, the top student in the science class, the academic god adored by everyone. And who was I? Always ranked at the bottom of the year. A rich kid who relied on family wealth. The mud that couldn't stick to the wall. Why did Ma Zhu feel so entitled to order me around? Not only because he was a top student, and I needed to copy his notes and homework, but also because the girl I liked was his childhood friend. She was the top student in the liberal arts class, Liu Ryan. Liu Ryan had high standards, both in her heart and her eyes. She considered herself above everyone else. She looked down on rich kids like me, and even more so on academic losers like me. But she never refused the gifts I gave her, even hinted at what she liked. I knew after, to please her, I bought everything she wanted. I even went out of my way to please her childhood friend as well. What a joke it was. In the end, she still didn't see me as worth her time. 10 years ago, Gu Wuyan was a full-born into wealth. But the Gu Wuyan who has been through all this is not the same anymore. I raised my eyes and glanced at Ma Zhu. His newest iPhone was also something I had bought for him. This guy really thought I was a complete sucker. Ma Zhu, thinking I didn't hear him, walked over. "Gu Wuyan, I'm talking to you," he said. "I'm out of money." How could that be? Don't you get tens of thousands of pocket money each month? It means no money. You should have some sense of it by now. Just last week, you asked for the newest iPhone. This phone doesn't cost that much. Stop trying to fool me. Ma Zhu glared at me in frustration. "Gu Wuyan, how dare you speak to me like this? This week, I won't take you to see Sister Liu Ryan." In the past, those words would have had me completely under his control. But now, they didn't threaten me at all. "Whatever," I said casually. I didn't look at him again, but I could imagine Ma Zhu's face, flushed with suppressed anger. I walked out of the classroom. Ma Zhu didn't chase after me, because the bell for class had rung. As a model student, he would never skip class. But I was different. I had always been at the bottom of the class. Skipping class was a regular thing for me. The teachers had clearly gotten used to it. They didn't care about me at all. After escaping from Ma Zhu, the world suddenly became much quieter. I walked toward the sports field, pondering why I had returned to the past. I remembered I had jumped off a building to commit suicide. Yes, I committed suicide by jumping. Because 10 years later, my family's company faced a financial crisis. My parents, in their desperation, got into a car accident. I had chosen a college major that went against their wishes. I didn't study finance and management, so no one could manage the family business. In the end, the company went bankrupt, and we were left with billions in debt. So I jumped. But unexpectedly, when I woke up again, I found myself back 10 years earlier. In those 10 years, I had regretted countless times not studying hard during high school, although I had used my financial power. And Ma Zhu and the others had tutored me for a few months. My grades back then were only good enough for a third-rate private college. My parents wanted me to study finance abroad, but I stubbornly chose to pursue music, something I loved. Now that I've returned to the past, for my parents' lives, for the sake of preventing our family's bankruptcy and saving the company from collapsing, I must study hard. I was racking my brain about how to approach this effort, since I hadn't studied in 10 years. when a volleyball suddenly fell from the sky and hit me on the head. I had been walking for a long time, and unknowingly I had reached the sports field. At that moment, a tall, slender girl rushed over in a flurry. She was from Liu Ryan's class. Since I often littered outside their classroom waiting for Liu Ryan, I recognized most of them. But I knew they secretly mocked me, calling me a foolish rich boy, a little lapdog with too much money. I heard her teasing voice. "Oh, it's brother Wuyan again. Are you here to look for Sister Liu Ryan?" Then she whistled toward Liu Ryan and said, "Hey, Liu Ryan, your brother Wuyan is here to see you." "Wait a moment," Liu Ryan replied. "You guys go ahead and play." Then, I saw a stunningly beautiful girl walking toward me. Her face was full of annoyance. "Gu Wuyan, haven't I told you before? Stop clinging to me all the time at school, especially during class. Don't you understand human speech?" I looked at the girl in front of me. Her skin was smooth and clear, her features delicate and well-defined. She was beautiful, but when she spoke to me, she never held back her harsh words. In my previous life, I had indeed pestered her relentlessly to be with me, going overboard with my persistence. After all, I was a rich kid, and no one had ever rejected me since childhood. She was the first. That ignited my strong interest in her. As the saying goes, the things you can't have seem the most precious. But over time, I came to see how fake this woman really was. Now that I've come back to the past, I realized I didn't really like her that much after all. "Where did you get the idea that I came to see you?" Liu Ryan seemed completely taken aback by the way I spoke to her. In her eyes, I was just a foolish idiot who would always bend to her will. Her face flushed red, but her sense of composure stopped her from responding. The eyes of everyone around us were drawn to the scene. People exchanged glances, as if they too were shocked that I would say something like that. I knew Liu Ryan felt embarrassed. She pointed her finger at me. "Gu Wuyan, don't come looking for me anymore. And don't follow Mazuri to my tutoring sessions on the weekends." With those words, she walked away without looking back. She probably still thought I'd show up the next day with gifts to apologize. Obviously, she was wrong. I wouldn't do that anymore. At that moment, a girl who had been sitting nearby on the sports field came up to me. It was Chen Meng from my class. Like me, she was another rich kid who didn't care much about studying. We were both at the bottom of the year's rankings. The difference was, I remembered that in my previous life, she went abroad, and when she returned, she had become a business tycoon who dominated the industry. Meanwhile, my family had fallen into ruin. Chen Meng smiled at me. "Not bad. Ian, you showed some guts today. You didn't embarrass us rich kids." Yeah, I used to be a little lapdog, and the rich kid circle mocked me for a long time because of it. From now on, things will be different. Haha, looks like you've finally woken up. You might actually have a chance. "We're not even close," I said. "Why do you care?" Then I turned and walked away from the field. Focusing on studying seriously was going to be tough. After school, I went home early. For the first time, I didn't shamelessly tag along with Liu Ryan. "Mom, Dad, I'm home." Dad was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper, and Mom was cooking in the kitchen. It felt so good to have someone waiting for me at home. This strengthened my determination to study hard and prevent everything that would happen 10 years later. "Why are you home so early today, Wuyan?" Mom poked her head out of the kitchen. I casually replied, "Just felt like coming back early. From now on, I'll always be this early." "Mom, Dad, I'm going to my room to study. No need to call me for dinner." Left in the living room, my parents exchanged puzzled looks. Is something off with our child today? Once in my room, I pulled out my textbooks and started studying. But unfortunately, I didn't understand a thing. I had no choice but to start with memorization. How do I even begin to memorize? Everything seemed incomprehensible. Help, this is exhausting. And so surrounded by a mountain of textbooks, I ended up sleeping until morning. It had been a long time since I slept so comfortably. After my parents passed away, one had taken on all the burdens of the family. I only slept 3 to 4 hours a day, and yet the company still went bankrupt. It feels amazing to get a second chance at life. Mom made breakfast, but both Dad and I didn't have time to eat it, so we packed it up to take with us. Dad drove me to school afterward. I gave my mom a tight hug and kissed her loudly on the cheek before leaving. I miss them so much. When Dad dropped me off at the school gate, I saw Ma Zuri. Clearly, he noticed me too. Or more accurately, he noticed the car my dad was driving. It was only then that I noticed Dad had bought a new car again. It seems, even with a second chance, Dad's hobbies remain unchanged. After saying goodbye to him, I didn't bother looking at Ma Zuri again. His face flushed with anger, yet he still followed me, albeit awkwardly. Gu Wuyan, I don't like that watch anymore, so don't buy it for me. I never said I was going to buy it for you, I replied. It's my birthday this weekend. Just get me any random gift. I'm hosting at the Yage Hotel. You should come too. Oh my god, how could he say this so matter-of-factly? I remembered in my previous life, I also went to his birthday party. Not only did I get him a gift, but I ended up footing the bill for all the food and drinks. After all, Yage wasn't a place these students could normally afford. A single meal could easily cost a few thousand. So it seems he's still determined to have his tantrum with me. Before, he would always wait for me to be the one to apologize first. Now, it's clear he just wants me there to cover the bill again. My mind quickly turned, and I stopped in my tracks, forcing a fake smile to stretch across my face. Alright, just let me know the room number. Satisfied with my answer, Mazuri seemed to relax a bit, then put on his usual aloof act as he headed to the classroom. He didn't say anything more to me. I didn't care to speak to him either. Rather than worrying about him, I should be thinking about how to study well. That was the real challenge I needed to focus on. As I was lost in thought, the history teacher walked into the classroom. He was a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a bit of a belly, resembling a jolly Maitreya Buddha, always smiling, with an endearing clumsiness. His teaching style was highly tangential, often weaving history into everyday life, and telling various stories and examples, which made his lessons anything but boring. So even though I hated studying in my previous life, I could at least pay attention in his history class. Besides, this old man had a habit of calling on me, always with a teasing grin. But even with his good-natured humor, I still only managed to score a little over 60 on my history exams. The long answer questions had too much writing, and they always frustrated me. Now, with this second chance, I felt a sense of familiarity looking at him. Everyone seems to be in high spirits today, he said, taking a sip of water, joking as he noticed our dazed expressions. Then he added, even Gu Wuyan didn't fall asleep, so everyone else must be wide awake too. The class erupted in laughter. I didn't mind it. It was true my habit of falling asleep in class was known throughout the entire grade, and none of the teachers could do anything about it. After all, I had practically bought my way into this school. Alright, let's begin. Today, we're covering the Industrial Revolution. This time, I listened with unusual focus. I barely took my eyes off the history teacher, so engrossed in the lesson. As he animatedly discussed history, the class flew by without me even noticing. Even I was amazed at myself, the points he covered in class. I could basically remember them all. The classmates around me stared in disbelief, except for Ma Zuri, whose eyes were full of disdain and contempt. Gu Wuyan, with that brain of yours, what could you possibly remember from listening to this? He said with a mocking laugh. I just shrugged out his sneer and didn't bother responding to him. For the rest of the classes, I focused intently, listening carefully. For subjects like politics and Chinese, I could remember most of the key points after hearing them once in class. But subjects like math and English, which required both thinking and memory, really gave me a headache. After all, I hadn't paid attention since the first year of high school, so there was a lot to catch up on. 1 or 2 classes definitely weren't enough to make up for all that I missed. I could only focus on understanding what was in front of me and tackle the rest during late night study sessions. When I got home that evening, I started looking for my first and second year textbooks. But then I suddenly remembered that I had found them too heavy, and every holiday, I gave all my books away to the school's cleaning lady. I hadn't even kept a single blank page from any of my notebooks. So that night, I rushed out to buy all the first and second year textbooks again, along with various workbooks and practice materials, determined to study hard. After finishing that, I started flipping through the senior year textbooks. I immersed myself in the sea of books once again. Time passed quickly, and soon the weekend arrived. Early in the morning, Mazuri called me, and I remembered that it was his birthday weekend. It turns out he couldn't book a spot at Yage for his birthday dinner, so he borrowed my VIP card to reserve a private room. Yage usually requires reservations in advance. Otherwise, there are no available tables, only high-end private rooms. I remembered Mazuri's smug expression when he successfully booked the room with my VIP card, then invited the whole class for the meal. I had a habit of waking up grumpy, and his call early in the morning jolted me out of sleep. It left me feeling extremely irritated. Without thinking much, I casually said, "I've got something to do, can't make it," and then went back to sleep. It felt incredibly satisfying. I had achieved my goal, so I didn't think about it any further. When I woke up, it was already past 1 p.m. Since my previous life, it had been a long time since I had slept so comfortably. Before going to bed, I had turned off my phone to avoid being disturbed. When I powered it back on, there were countless messages and dozens of missed calls, all from Mazuri. I smirked, knowing full well what had happened. Suddenly, a call from an unfamiliar number came through. "Hello, is this Mr. Gu Wuyan?" "Yes, this is he." "Hello, sir, I'm a staff member from Yage Hotel. It appears that your VIP card has no remaining balance. A lady here, claiming to be your friend, requested to put today's bill on your account. Did you authorize this? They're still trying to use my card to rack up debts, huh? Sorry, that won't be happening. I told them the card was lost some time ago. It's not me who's been using it. If someone is trying to use it, please ask them for identification. Understood, sir. Apologies for the inconvenience." With that, the call ended. I opened WeChat, only to find a barrage of messages from Mazuri. He was demanding that I transfer 20,000 yuan to him, accusing me of tricking him and giving him an expired VIP card. But it was he who insisted on keeping up his flashy, arrogant act, always trying to look like the rich, top student. What does that have to do with me? He wanted to treat the entire class to a meal, aside from a few rich kids. There were students from weekend tutoring as well, so there were probably over 30 people. Given Mazuri's style, he likely assumed my VIP card had a ton of money on it, so he didn't hold back on spending. He spent lavishly to maintain his image. At Yage Hotel, a VIP private room's meal costs at least 5,000 yuan per table. From what I know, Mazuri's parents earn only about 7,000 yuan per month. So how is he going to handle this situation? I silenced my phone, ignoring Mazuri's calls and messages. Then I got dressed, put on a black baseball cap and a mask, and decided to head to Yage to check things out. When I arrived, most of the 30th people had already left. It seemed they had sensed something was off. Apparently, Mazuri claimed his card had been lost, and he tried to ask everyone to chip in for the bill. But most of them made excuses, saying they had something urgent at home, and quickly left. These were mostly regular high school students, so of course they didn't stick around. A few of the boys who were close to Mazuri actually pulled out their savings, lending him several thousand yuan, but it was far from enough. In the end, Mazuri snuck off to the restroom and called Liu Ryan, borrowing a few thousand more from her. Then he called his parents, lying that he needed money for an extracurricular class and study materials, managing to get a few more thousand from them. Together with the money he had scammed from me earlier, he barely scraped together enough to cover the bill. Now he was truly living in debt. On Monday during school, Mazuri cornered me near the sports field, his face full of anger, yet somehow mixed with a look of pitiful grievance. He even started crying, as if he had suffered some great injustice. Gu Wuyan, how could you do this to me? Do you have no shame? Is it fun to mess with me? Do you find it amusing to see me embarrassed? His emotional outburst left me momentarily speechless. You're the one who wanted to celebrate your birthday. You're the one who insisted on treating everyone at Yage VIP. What does any of that have to do with me? Mazuri, the school's acknowledged top student and male idol, always turned heads wherever he went. Now, with him crying and accusing me in public, the students passing by were all glaring at me with contempt and disgust. He was doing this on purpose. Before I could even respond, Liu Ryan rushed over, pointing her finger at me and shouting, "Gu Wuyan, why are you bullying Mazuri again?" Again? When did I ever bully him? I've told you already I don't like you. Stop making things difficult for Mazuri. Liking her wasn't her fault. But seeing this play out again, both of them had truly reached the height of shamelessness. Fine, I won't like you anymore either. And for the record, I didn't bully him. He was the one forcing me to send him money, treating him to meals, and buying him gifts. Congratulations to both of you. May you live happily ever after. I shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. Mazuri and Liu Ryan were stunned and quickly fled the crowd. Gu Wuyan, was no longer the soft, easily manipulated pushover I once was. I had changed. When I returned to the classroom, Mazuri loudly proclaimed, "Gu Wuyan, what happened to you? Is it just because I didn't take you to study with Sister Liu Ryan last week? What do you mean? What happened to me? I just stopped sucking up to you, that's all." As soon as he said that, the entire class assumed I had wronged him, and none of them gave me a friendly look. Hey, did you all forget what happened over the weekend? Some, like Chen Meng, just sat watching the drama unfold, as if it were all entertainment. Sitting at her desk, we didn't exchange any more words. Then our homeroom teacher entered with a stack of papers. He was also our math teacher, nicknamed Seaweed Snack, because he always had a distinctive smell. As usual, he called for attention. "All right, class, everyone put your books away. Today is the monthly exam, and after the exam, there will be a parent-teacher meeting." What a headache, with nothing to rely on except the scraps of knowledge I remembered from 10 years ago. I braced myself for the test. The seating arrangement for the monthly exam was based on your previous results. I definitely wasn't in the same classroom as Mazuri. I was placed in the classroom for the bottom 30 students in the year. As Mazuri passed by me, he wore a smug and disdainful expression. "PFFT, the only thing you have to brag about is being the first in the year." He sneered, then added, "Good luck with your exam, Gu Wuyan," walking over to give my shoulder a light pat, pretending to encourage me in a patronizing way. It made me feel utterly disgusted. I quickly brushed my shoulder off. A group of students gathered around him again, whispering, "Mazuri, don't worry about him. He only got in because his family had some money and pulled strings. He's just a connected idiot with a pig's brain. But you're different. You're a true academic god." Of course, I heard them. They were right. I had only relied on some dirty money back then. I made my way to the last classroom and took the second to last seat. Yes, I was ranked second from the bottom in the year. The last place belonged to Chen Meng, who was lazily sprawled across her desk, as if she wasn't even preparing for the exam. Her attitude was starting to mess with my focus. "Everyone sit down," the proctor said as they started handing out the test papers. The first exam was the same old subject, Chinese. I quickly skimmed through and randomly answered the reading comprehension questions. Classical Chinese, no chance. Soon enough, I reached the part one dreaded most. The essay, too many words. I could already feel the headache coming. The essay prompt was to write about the world of science in your eyes, or your vision of future technological development. Actually, that wasn't too bad for me, since I had traveled back from 10 years into the future. So I wrote about how, as kids, we all wished for a future where schools would be accessible to everyone, and how medical institutions would advance, among other things. I barely managed to squeeze out 800 words. Then I noticed that the person behind me hadn't even started writing. I shook my head in resignation. But hey, she's destined to become a business tycoon in the future. How could I compare with that? I should just focus on studying. After finishing several exams, aside from a few questions in math that I guessed, I managed to write answers for almost everything else. That was a huge improvement. After all, I used to be just like Chen Meng, leaving most of the test blank. 2 days later, the results were posted. I got a score of 362. Still as terrible as ever. In social sciences, I only managed 174, just barely passing in most areas. It was within my expectations. But my Chinese score was 87, and I was really surprised that I got 50 points on the essay, only 3 points behind Ma Zuri. My math and English scores, however, were disappointing. Math 39, English 62. Oh dear. How was I supposed to turn things around at this rate? Meanwhile, Ma Zuri still ranked first in the year, with a score of 632. A massive 300-point gap between us. Gu Wuyan, you've been working so hard lately. How come you only got 362? Ma Zuri asked smugly. Do you know what fake effort is? Ma Zuri, I replied. It only fools yourself. Laughter rippled through the room. Ma Zuri stepped closer. Gu Wuyan, if you apologize to me, I might consider letting you join me and Sister Liu Ryan for tutoring again. But you're too dumb, he added. So you'll need to pay tutoring fees. Since we're classmates. How about 500 yuan per session? With the scores I have. You're still going to charge me 500 per class, I scoffed. Ma Zuri's eyes widened in surprise. The people around him chimed in. Ma Zuri, don't bother with him. You've been tutoring him for so long, and he hasn't made any progress. Plus, he's an ungrateful backstabber, taking advantage of your tutoring sessions for free. He's really biting the hand that fed him. Ungrateful, I repeated. Every time I treat them to meals, buy them gifts, it costs me over 10,000 yuan a month. Who's really freeloading here? By the way, Ma Zuri, remember the TF watch I brought over last time? And that Hermes bag? Whenever you get a chance, please return them to me. I forgot to take them back. But you gave those to me, Ma Zuri protested. When did I ever say I gave them to you? I just left them at your place. That doesn't mean they were gifts. Ma Zuri was left speechless. I had never actually said those items were for him. They had always assumed I was giving them away. And honestly, it had been true back then. But now I wanted them back. Hearing this, the people around us suddenly went quiet. The atmosphere shifted, becoming much more subdued. Next, our homeroom teacher announced that there would be a parent-teacher meeting tomorrow to discuss the exam results. I felt a headache coming on as the teacher asked my parents and me to visit the office. As we approached, we could already hear a sharp female voice yelling, demanding to change classes and seats, and telling someone to get out of the class. When my mom heard this, she was not having it. She immediately dragged me inside the office. The woman inside, seeing us enter, didn't even bother to lower her voice. She continued her tirade without pause. Teacher, you must move my son, Ma Zuri, to a different seat. Last time, he scored 650 points. But now he only got 632. His score dropped significantly. At this rate, he won't get into Peking University. The difficulty of the test varies each time. The teacher began to explain. And Ma Zuri is still ranked first. There's no need to worry. But before the teacher could finish, Ma Zuri's mother turned her attention to me. Of course, he's being affected by someone. My son is so outstanding. His seatmate should be someone equally excellent. But look at this slacker. only 39 points in math, and a total score of just 362. If he keeps sitting next to my son, who's going to be responsible for my Mazuri's future? My mom couldn't hold her temper any longer. Excuse me. The teacher just said it's a matter of test difficulty. Why are you targeting my son? Blaming him for your son's poor performance? Your son's bad score has nothing to do with mine. My son has improved by over 100 points, and I'm proud of him. That's only because he's been studying with my son, Mazuri. It's obvious. Otherwise, how else would your son improve while mine falls behind? He's dragging my son down. Teacher, I don't care. You need to change his seat immediately, or get him out of this class. But the seating arrangement is based on a 1-to-1 ranking system. The teacher explained, so changing seats isn't that simple. My son isn't going to put up with this. And if someone scores badly again, don't you dare blame my son for it. Mom, you're spot on, I thought to myself. He really did blame me for his failures for a lifetime. In the end, I was made to switch seats. The teacher let me choose where to sit, but the whole class avoided me like the plague. The only open seat was next to Chen Meng. After all, both of us were the rich kids who didn't care about studying. Both disliked and unwelcomed by others. We were both labeled as slackers and outcasts, so we became desk mates. Hey, desk mate! Chen Meng greeted me in a sarcastic, almost menacing tone. I look forward to working with you. I really didn't feel like dealing with him at all. Later, the homeroom teacher came into the classroom and praised me in front of everyone, saying I had made progress. I'm not at the very bottom anymore, he said. Keep up the good work. It was the first time I'd ever been complimented at school, and it felt kind of surreal. Hey, Gu Wuyan! Why have you suddenly changed so much? Chen Meng casually asked out of nowhere. I was extremely annoyed, but remembering that he would become a business giant in the future, I figured it wasn't worth getting on his bad side. So I forced a smile. I just wanted to try something different. I'm curious what it feels like to be hardworking, rich, handsome, and smart. He silently gave me a thumbs up and said nice. Then he slumped back onto his desk to sleep again. At that moment, I felt a resentful, angry glare directed at me, which quickly turned into a mocking smile. I noticed his lips moving slightly, as if whispering, Gu Wuyan, you'll never surpass me in this lifetime. Well, that's not a given. For the first time, I walked into the teacher's office holding my math paper. The teachers in the office were all shocked. They couldn't believe it. But what could I do? I was just that bad at math, and I couldn't figure it out no matter how hard I tried. Excuse me, teacher, I said. There are still a few problems I don't quite understand. Could you explain them to me? The math teacher, though momentarily stunned, soon began patiently going over the problems. He even took the time to teach me a few things from earlier lessons. By the end of it, I pretty much understood everything. Did you get it now, Gu Wuyan? Thank you, teacher. Yes, I understand it all now. Good, you've been making a lot of progress recently. Keep it up. Feel free to ask me anytime you have questions. I started asking questions to all my teachers, and they didn't care whether my grades were good or bad. As long as I was asking, they were always patient in explaining. This really made studying much less stressful. One day during math class, the teacher introduced a problem, one I had already seen in my practice materials and had asked him about before. Without hesitation, he called on me to go up and solve it on the board. Mazuri muttered, "What's the teacher thinking? You couldn't even solve this problem completely. Why ask Gu Wuyan to do it? Who knows? Maybe he actually can solve it." Someone replied, "Maybe the teacher doesn't like him either," and called him up to humiliate him. Someone whispered with a laugh. They thought they were speaking softly, but I heard every word. I took a deep breath to calm myself and walked up to the board. The key to this problem was proving that the two lines were perpendicular. I worked through the three-dimensional geometry, connecting to points along the coordinate axes, and demonstrated how the two lines were perpendicular to each other. About 10 minutes later, I finished explaining the problem, still holding my breath. The math teacher chuckled softly. Not bad. Gu Wuyan's approach is completely correct. Let's give him some encouragement. I finally exhaled in relief. Looking down from the podium, I saw Ma Zuri's face had turned a shade of furious blue. For weeks, I had been burning the midnight oil, working through countless practice sheets and exercises, while Ma Zuri, convinced I would never surpass him, grew increasingly arrogant. He'd boast, even if I don't study, even if I skip tutoring sessions, you'll never catch up to me. Well, this is what arrogance gets you. His friends were quick to comfort him. Don't overthink it, Ma Zuri. He can't really compare to you. It was just a fluke. If he's given another problem, he probably won't solve it. He's been going to the office every day. The teacher probably explained this exact problem to him beforehand. No one's going to take your top spot. You're still number one. Hearing this, Ma Zuri seemed to relax a little. He walked over to me and said, Gu Wuyan, don't think that just because you got lucky once or twice, you have any chance of surpassing me. It's never going to happen. I won't give you that chance. I couldn't help but feel a bit baffled. I was studying to get into Peking University, not to beat him at some pointless rivalry. I'd cut down on my time spent goofing off, stopped skipping classes, and regularly asked questions, which drastically changed how all the teachers viewed me. Meanwhile, Ma Zuri frequently took leave. But the homeroom teacher always approved it because of his stellar grades. Who knows what secret plans he's up to now? Chen Ming, still slumped on the desk next to me, was napping. I quietly worked on my math problems. Suddenly, he turned his head and said, Hey, stop overthinking it. The answer's C. I frowned and glared at him. Then I glanced back at the problem and plugged the answer in, and C was indeed correct. He had worse grades than me, so I just assumed he guessed. I didn't pay him much attention, but he seemed bored and started casually giving me the answers to the following questions. I stared at him, bewildered. Are you that free? And went back to sleep. But here's where it got strange. When I checked the answers later, all of the answers he gave me were correct. If it was just luck or coincidence, he might have gotten 2 or 3 right. But he'd rattled off 11 answers, and every single one was right. A thought suddenly hit me. Maybe this guy was pretending to be clueless. Could he be hiding his true abilities? I steeled myself, determined to find out. I pulled out all the difficult problems I had asked the teachers about, the ones they said were especially hard. And he solved them effortlessly, finishing them in no time. When I checked the answers, they were all correct. I looked at him, utterly amazed. Hey, don't look at me like that. I don't have anything strange on me. How do you know the answers just by glancing at the problems? These are so simple and formulaic. If you can't solve them at a glance, you must be an idiot. I knew he was insulting me, so I said, Hey, how about we make a deal? I won't accept a student, he cut in, if you don't teach me how to solve these. I'll tell everyone you're pretending to be dumb. He smirked and said, Do you think anyone would believe you, rich boy? And I never said I didn't know how to solve them. Don't try to threaten me. I was starting to see why this guy would become a business titan in the future. Fine, I'll teach you. But you'll have to agree to do something for me. I eyed him warily. What do you want? Relax, it won't go against any principles. Alright, tell me. I haven't decided yet. I'll let you know when I think of something. For now, meet me at the rooftop after school. With that, he went back to sleep. After school, I rushed to the rooftop. Sure enough, Chen Ming was already waiting there. There was a small table, a blackboard, and a lot of books. This must be his secret study base. Come on, sit down, he said. Then he started teaching me from the basics of the first-year curriculum. This guy wasn't just brilliant at math. He had mastered the core concepts of all the other subjects as well. He really was the perfect example of someone pretending to be clueless while secretly being a genius. I had thought he was just another slacker. but it turned out he was simply hiding his true academic prowess. "What are you spacing out for?" he said, as a piece of chalk hit me straight in the head. I winced in pain, gritting my teeth, while Chen Ming laughed beside me. "Are you listening or not?" "Yes, I'm listening," he continued explaining for about an hour, and then we both went home. He even gave me homework to do. So I pulled another late-night study session. The next day, I came into class and found Chen Ming still napping at his desk. Hearing me sit down, he didn't even lift his head, just stuck out a hand. "Did you finish the homework I gave you? Let me check." Annoyed, I glared at him but handed over my homework. And so this became my routine: studying in school, asking teachers for help during the day, getting explanations from Chen Ming after school, and studying by myself at home. This went on for about 20 days. Then came the second monthly exam, and I was feeling confident about testing my progress. I scored 482, an improvement of over 100 points. During these 20 days, I had barely seen Ma Zhu at school. He had been taking medical leave for most of the time, but he returned just in time for the exam, supposedly to crush me with a score of 602. He had dropped to 10th in the grade, still higher than me, but I didn't care and wasn't interested in what was going on with him. This time, Ma Zhu was also called in for a parent-teacher meeting, but it was another woman who came in for him, and he got scolded so badly he didn't dare to speak up. By the time of the third monthly exam, my score had stabilized above 500. When the final exams came around, I scored an impressive 550, landing me within the top 100 in the grade. Praise and encouragement flooded in from all sides. However, Ma Zhu was absent from the final exam. I didn't bother asking why. The winter break was a good one, as I allowed myself a few days of relaxation. But soon, I was itching to dive back into studying. Every bit of progress brought me immense satisfaction. After the break, I called Chen Ming every day, whether she was sleeping or not, and dragged her out to study. If she refused to come out, I would go straight to her house and wait for her. For a while, she started avoiding me whenever she saw me, but our tutoring sessions continued nonetheless. Still, she never mentioned what I had to agree to in return for her help. We started studying a week early, and finally, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time, Ma Zhu. He looked much thinner and more worn out, but one thing hadn't changed. He still greeted me with that same hostile expression, as if I owed him millions of yuan. I kept my head down and worked hard just like the previous semester. The mocking and scorn from others had significantly decreased, though I hadn't paid much attention to it before. What surprised me, though, was that many classmates began asking me questions, which made me feel a bit awkward at first. It felt like I had somehow inspired the entire class, as everyone seemed to be putting in more effort. I couldn't afford to slack off either. Though Ma Zhu had returned, he was still taking frequent leaves of absence, showing up sporadically just like last semester. Even though his grades were excellent, the homeroom teacher was starting to get fed up. So once again, they called in his parents, which kept him in school for a few weeks. But after a while, he stopped coming altogether, and the homeroom teacher didn't bother anymore. After all, high school is a place where self-discipline is key. Meanwhile, my grades continued to improve steadily. Finally, in the last monthly exam, I broke 600 to 607 to be exact. I was one step closer to my dream. As for Chen Ming, she was still handing in mostly blank papers. I asked her why, and she casually replied, "Don't worry about my style of doing things." So I stopped asking. I was quietly proud of myself for making it into the top 10 in the grade. With only a month left before the college entrance exam, I kept pushing forward, endlessly practicing exam problems. Even if I only slept for hours a day, I pushed myself harder. My parents, worried about my health, urged me not to overwork myself, telling me that the family business was large enough, that I'd be set for life, even without studying. But I knew they were secretly proud and happy about my academic progress. The day before the college entrance exam finally arrived, I sat quietly in the classroom, reviewing problems. Chenming, as usual, was napping on her desk. Casually, I asked her, "Are you planning to take the exam?" It felt like a redundant question, since I already knew the answer. After all, I knew that in the end, she would go abroad and eventually become a business tycoon. But I just couldn't help asking. Chenming shifted her position, still lying on the desk. "It depends on my mood," she said. With that, I decided not to press further. I focused on preparing for the college entrance exam. "Keep going, Gu Wuyan," I told myself. Ma Zuri returned for the exam as well, but he seemed so disconnected, no longer like a student. When the last exam was finally over, I felt completely drained. But I had confidence in myself. My parents approached me with flowers in hand, waiting by the exam grounds. I scanned the area, but I didn't see Chenming anywhere. She must have already made arrangements for going abroad. For some reason, a strange feeling welled up inside me. When the results were about to be released, I was alone in my room, while my parents waited anxiously outside the door. Slowly, I typed in my name, exam number, and ID. 667 points. I scored 667 points. My parents heard me scream from the other side of the door, and they rushed in. "What's wrong?" "It's okay, son. Even if it didn't go well." "Mom, Dad, I scored 667. 667. My goodness. Our ancestors must be blessing us. My son, you're amazing." They immediately started calling all the relatives to share the news, and my phone started lighting up with WeChat red envelopes from everyone. My dad even said he wanted to throw a 3-day banquet to celebrate. In the midst of all the excitement, I sent a message to Chenming, though I wasn't sure if she had even taken the exam. But since Chenming had helped me so much, I figured it wouldn't hurt to ask. Then she casually sent me a screenshot. Chenming had scored 702 and was the provincial top scorer in liberal arts. Wow, talk about feeling inadequate by comparison. "So, are you still going abroad?" I asked. There was a brief pause before she replied. "How did you know I was planning to go abroad?" "Oh, just a lucky guess," I said. In my previous life, Chenming hadn't taken the college entrance exam and had gone straight overseas. Nobody knew she was this brilliant back then. A few days later, our school organized a farewell graduation ceremony, and all the subject teachers were there. Chenming and I attended as well, and most of our class showed up, except for a few who were going abroad. The only one missing was Ma Zuri. While chatting with the teachers, I couldn't help but overhear some gossip from my classmates. Apparently, Ma Zuri had only scored in the 400s on the exam, not even good enough for a third-tier college. It seemed his parents had divorced, and his mother had remarried. His father was in poor health, and neither wanted to take responsibility for him. He ended up living with his father, but his stepmother treated him badly. Later, she became pregnant, and his father became addicted to gambling. Money ran out, and Ma Zuri owed money to people outside the family, so he had to take up part-time jobs, which led to his academic decline. In my previous life, I had never heard about these things. Maybe it was because he had always relied on me for money back then, so he wasn't affected by his family's troubles. Either way, I didn't feel the need to get involved anymore. It wasn't my problem. Even Liu Ryan had reached out to me a few times, and I thought she had deep feelings for Ma Zuri. In the end, Liu Ryan actually told me she had misunderstood me before, and now wanted to pursue me instead of Ma Zuri. Was she serious? I had good grades, a solid family background. Why would I ever like someone like him? After submitting my college applications, I was accepted into Peking University's Guanghua School of Management with a minor in English, and thus began my joyful university life. Before submitting my applications, though, Chenming finally revealed the condition she had mentioned long ago, on the rooftop where we had studied for the better part of a year. Before I could even speak, Chenming spoke first. "I like you," she said. "Don't rush to reject me. Let me explain. I've liked you for a long time. Ever since the first year of high school, I've liked you. I even gave up the science track for you and chose the liberal arts track instead. But I always thought you were a fool, chasing after that girl from the liberal arts class, following Mazu around like an idiot. I used to wonder, if I were in the liberal arts class too, would you like me? But really, I just wanted to be closer to you. Yet, as expected, you didn't notice me for all of the second year. Finally, in the third year, my chance came. Gu Wuyan, I really you. Before she could finish, I hugged her tightly. I kind of like you too, I admitted. Chen Meng, who had always seemed so composed, suddenly looked like a child who didn't know what to do, overjoyed for a long time. Later, I asked her why she had always pretended to be a slacker. She told me she was rebelling against her family, not wanting to follow their plans. Of course, that explained why she went abroad in the previous timeline. I remembered now. Before I submitted my applications, I had received a message from her asking where I planned to apply. I casually responded, going abroad. Turns out, everything had a reason behind it.